on one of ours. Take it out.
This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
I'm Eric Freshley, I'm coming to get ya, and I haven't been on in a little while. As you can see, I've moved recently. I still got a lot of unpacked boxes over there, and this wall behind me's completely blank. I wanted to kind of get this office, and my lighting's not great in here. I wanted to kind of get this office a little bit better before I started really pumping out more stuff, but couldn't wait any longer on this. There's something I've been wanting to talk about, and really I've been wanting to talk about it for years, but now more than ever, it's time to actually get it out there. And I want to talk about why now is the time for Xbox to do a mascot fighter, something like Smash Brothers. And the reason now is the time is because Metaverses was just revealed yesterday from WB. And obviously the Nickelodeon game happened, that kind of came and went. And maybe most importantly, we just passed the Xbox 20th anniversary. And that feels like the kind of time to talk about a hypothetical game like this, and why they need to be working on it. And it's kind of a bummer that they're missing out. If you're into the idea, please like this video and share it around. It really, really makes all the difference on YouTube. Jez Corden of Windows Central, who's kind of one of the most preeminent Xbox journalists out there, talked about on the Xbox 2 podcast last week that he has spoken to people at Xbox about this, and they said they feel like they haven't earned the right to do a kind of game like this. And I'm telling you, Xbox, you're wrong. You're wrong, and you need to rethink this, and you need to make this a priority, I believe. A couple reasons why. A mascot fighter crossover game builds your whole brand. It strengthens every one of your IP. The perfect example of that is Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem is a franchise that would be dead if not for Smash Brothers. It was saved by Smash Brothers, by Martha and Roy's inclusion. And with Xbox doing such a great job of offering so many games in backwards compatibility and offering them on Game Pass, I think using a game like this to embolden the fan base and get them to try these games out could only benefit them. Crimson Skies, by its inclusion in a game like this, could be strengthened and possibly even revived if it's done well. It's a real rallying point for fans of your ecosystem. Another massive reason, we're going to talk about characters later, but most of the characters we're talking about have at least one game in Game Pass. So this game, hypothetical game, while being very fun on its own, is also kind of a backdoor advertisement for Game Pass, which is the most important thing the Xbox division is trying to sell these days. And this might sound sacrilege, but there are things that Xbox would do even better than Smash Brothers in their game, because they do it better in a lot of their ongoing games. Things like, well, online play. We saw from Killer Instinct that they know how to make online infrastructure work in this kind of game, including rollback and dedicated servers and all those things that Metaverses is now taking advantage of. And we also saw with Sea of Thieves and State of Decay and many other games that they keep support going, which is something that Smash Brothers hasn't always been great about. They don't really offer costumes and events and really the kind of things that a live service is expected to do today, and Xbox is great at those things. So I really think, and Metaverse seems like they're gonna kind of try to fill that need, but Xbox should have been there, and they still can be there. And man, think of the possibility of all the stages and the music too, the iconic music from Halo and Fable and Viva Pinata and Ori, and how they could put those into this game, but also do new versions of things like Gears music. Now I'm going to use Smash Brothers as a point of comparison a lot here for philosophical reasons, because the games would be similar in as much as bringing a lot of crossover characters from your IPs together in order to make a game that is simple to play but hard to master and fight them out. But I actually believe that if Xbox were to do this game, gameplay-wise, it shouldn't be like Smash Brothers, because, well, number one, there's really only one Smash Brothers. it's going to be very tough to top them, especially on your first going out. And we already have games like that, including Smash, but of course Metaverse and Nickelodeon, as I mentioned. I'd rather they fill a void that's not being filled right now. And I'm thinking Power Stone 2. If you've played Power Stone 2 on Dreamcast or PSP, then you know that's a niche that is just that we don't have right now. And it is similar to Smash Brothers. It is simple for everybody to pick up and try out and have fun, but it is not an easy thing to master. And it would have to be modernized, of course. We expect more from our games today. If you never played it, think of a camera perspective like Hades or even Diablo a little bit, and and you have a fighting game like that. Rather than it be ring outs like Smash Brothers, it would be more of a health bar system like most fighting games. But 4 players from an isometric perspective with highly destructible environments. There's a couple reasons for this. Like I mentioned, that it's just a niche not being filled. Also, Xbox characters tend to use a lot of guns and a lot of range. And I think, you have a camera perspective like Power Stone 2 and combine the controls a little bit like a twin-stick shooter, almost like a Helldivers or something like that, and I think that would serve the gun users on their roster a lot, of which there are a lot. And maybe most importantly, I think of PlayStation All-Stars. I actually kind of like that game. I know it's kind of popular to just bash it now, but I think one of the problems was when you dove into it, it was a lot different than Smash, but it didn't look like it on first glance. I think most players took one look at it and said, oh, that's a Smash clone, and never gave it a second look. If you have a completely different camera perspective, nobody can accuse it of just being a Smash clone. For better or worse, it would be its own thing. And I think so the immediate dismissiveness wouldn't happen. Now, who would develop it would be a real challenge because, like I said, we don't have a Power Stone-like game today, so it's tough to look around and say, well, these guys did it well, let's just get them. That doesn't exist. There's a couple of indies, and maybe Xbox could acquire one of those indies and really pump up their budget and to kind of do the game we would expect from a first party. But I think maybe you go for somebody. I would love it to see Ion Galaxy do it. They did Killer Instinct after Double Helix handed it off to them in Season 2, and they, that is more of a hardcore fighting game than what we're talking about. We want something that's approachable to everybody, but does have that layer of competitiveness for people who want it. But I think they would just be an outstanding fit if you can get them. But with all that preamble done, it's time to talk about the most exciting part, which is characters, because that is often the common criticism when you bring up a game like this from Xbox. People say they don't have the roster, and I say BS. That's complete nonsense, and we're going to prove that here. Now, I'm not doing a build the roster type video where I try to make this a realistic roster. I narrow it down to 25 or something. No. I'm going to give you a ton of characters because my purpose here today is to illustrate all the possibilities, which is going to be a lot. And of course, if I were the developer on this game, I would have to narrow it down, but we don't have to do that here. Instead, we can just say everybody on the table. But anyway, let's talk about characters, and I'm going to give these to you in a couple chunks, and I'm not going to talk a lot about most of them because, well, like I mentioned, there's a whole lot of them. This first little chunk here I want to talk about are first-party A-listers. At least the franchise are A-listers, not all the characters. These are franchises that would have to be represented in the game. A lot of them are still ongoing.
No. Not then. Not again. We need to run.
No, we need to fight.
Of course, first up is Halo. Let's not beat around the bush here. Master Chief is the Mario of this game. He would have to be in there. And I would make him a very much of a ranged character. His assault rifle is kind of the most iconic thing. He has it on all the box art. So I would have him, that with simple grenades, and I'd have him use mostly weapons from the UNSC, the human weapons. And I would give him some enhanced costumes too. And what I'm talking about when I say enhanced costumes, because we're going to talk about these a couple times, they don't change what the character does, but they change how he looks, but also new voice lines. It would change what the announcer calls him, and kind of all that stuff. In the same way, Bowser Jr. changes to the different Koopalings. And so with Master Chief, you can make Noble 6 a costume, you can make the ODST Rookie from ODST, you could make Spartan Locke an enhanced costume, maybe even Sergeant Johnson, to be honest with you. And I would give Master Chief, since his goal is to keep range and chip down your health with assault rifle and grenades and other ranged weapons, I would have him have his grapple shot from the new game, but that it can't hook onto people, it can only hook onto walls, so he uses it as a getaway tool, and is able to do that to keep a distance from people, and maybe even have the drop ball from the new game to have people have a tough time getting in close to him. The second character is the Arbiter, and this is the reason I said Master Chief should have all the UNSC weapons, because the Arbiter is going to have the Covenant, as well as he's going to have the Energy Sword by default. And he can also turn invisible as one of his specials, and kind of... You would use... His special would turn invisible and kind of teleport him forward a little bit, even though you wouldn't call it a teleport. The other two playable elites from Halo 3 Co-op could be enhanced costumes for him, as well as the Killer Instinct costume, Atriox from Halo Wars 2, and now it seems like he's also going to be in Halo Infinite. I think he is the other third necessity. He's a brute, he could be one of the big bruisers of this game. As well as Tartarus and Eshram could be enhanced costumes for him. And there's some more from Halo that I think are maybe less of a necessity, but are possibilities, like the Didact, Warden Eternal. There's some new villains being brought in for Halo Infinite, like Jaga and the Harbinger of Truth. We don't know much about them yet. We'll have to see how they turn out in Halo Infinite. But Master Chief, Arbiter, and Atriox, I think, are mandatory. And moving on to Gears of War, Marcus Phoenix has to be a character in the game, and he would have Coltrane, Dom, and Baird as enhanced costumes you could play as. I would give him weapons from Gears 1 through 3 as his different specials. He has the standard Lancer as his defaults, and he uses things like the Gnasher shotgun, and then Kate Diaz is a separate character, and she would use weapons from Gears 4 and 5. She would have the Retro Lancer probably as her defaults, and she'll use the Overkill and all the new weapons that they've introduced in the last couple games. And she'll have Del, JD Phoenix, and Foz as enhanced costumes for her that you can earn or buy. And General Ram, I think, is absolutely a necessary character. Another big bruiser just like Atriox. And Scourge from Gears 2 is another possibility with his unique weapon of this dual-bladed chainsaw staff. There's a lot of possibilities for moves there. Ori in the Blind Forest and Ori of the Will-o'-the-Wisp was one of the biggest successes from the Xbox One generation, so Ori obviously has to be included in this game. Even though he's normally a small guy, we're going to size him up a little bit, and he has to be in. He had so many abilities in Will-o'-the-Wisp that I don't know if you could include them all on just one character. So we might also include Ophir, who was the merchant who sold him abilities in Will-o'-the-Wisps, and you could maybe put half of the abilities from the game on Ori and half on Ophir. As well as Gumo, who was a boss character in the first game and later became Ori's friend. He could possibly be in too.
Not all stories have happy endings. But yours has yet to be written.
And then we move on to Fable, and there's a lot of possibilities from Fable. Sparrow was the protagonist of Fable 2. Jack of Blades was the antagonist from 1, and he might be the most iconic character from the whole series. Teresa was your sister character from Fable 1, and she maintained throughout the series, and she got these kind of supernatural or ethereal abilities that could be very interesting in a game like this. Hammer and Reaver are also on the table. And then Minecraft. Of course Minecraft's going to be included. It's the most successful game in the history of mankind. Steve, with Alex as a enhanced costume, will have to be in. They'll have to find ways to make it different than how Smash Bros. Portrayed the character, but that's going to be one of the biggest points of getting people into this game would be Steve. But I would also include the Arch Illager, who was the antagonist from Minecraft Dungeons. Senua from Hellblade. Now she's going to be a real challenge because Hellblade is an important game about real issues, and the kind of game we're talking about is going to be silly. Mascot brawlers by their nature are silly. but you don't want to diminish what Hellblade accomplished. You don't want to diminish what that game talks about. So you have to be very, very careful how you would handle Senua in a game like this. You don't want her doing emotes where she's flossing and all kinds of stuff like that. So you have to be delicate. I would be in constant communication with Ninja Theory and say, hey, is this okay? Are we going too far? How can we include this character but still be respectful of what Hellblade talks about? Psychonauts 2 is one of the best reviewed games of the year. It just got nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and now, since Xbox owns Double Fine, and of course both Psychonauts are on Game Pass, we have to talk about Psychonauts. Rez is a shoo-in for this game, especially with all the crazy abilities they gave him in Psychonauts 2. A lot of that just feels like it would fit one-to-one with the kind of game we're talking about. But Lily could also be included. She specializes in pyrokinesis and also the ability to talk to plants, and I think those two things could really make an interesting moveset. Her moveset also has to incorporate her pet rat Harold in some way. You could maybe even include Dr. Lobato in. But while we're talking about Double Fine, they also made Costume Quest, and so Reynold is going to be a character on a game, and you could have Ren, his sister, as an enhanced costume because you could choose between the two of them in the game. But speaking of recent Xbox acquisitions, they also got In Exile, and that includes the Wasteland franchise. We're going to include Scotchmo in here, the drunkard with a shotgun. That just sounds like a barrel of laughs. And with Scotchmo, we have to include Major Tomcat in his moveset as one of his special abilities. And they brought Compulsion fairly recently, and that includes We Happy Few. I know that game wasn't a huge hit or a critical hit, but it is now a franchise that they own, and it is a game that actually, it does have a cult fan base, and it did get better with its DLC, and its last DLC included Victoria Bing, who was an antagonist in the base game, and she has a whip, and think of all the things you could do with a whip in a game like this for as far as a moveset, so she's going to be included.
I suppose time will tell, but no matter who this stranger chooses to be, the Halcyon Colony will never be the same.
We're going to go into a little chunk of Obsidian here, and we're going to talk about the Outer Worlds. You could include the player character, of course, but I really think Pavarti would probably be the way to go here instead. She was the character that caught on the most from that game. She also has an electric hammer, as well as all the science weapons from the game you could include with her and make a very interesting moveset. And if you want to include a second character from the Outer Worlds, Sam the Robot would be a lot of fun and unique too. They also made Grounded, which was a surprise hit. It's still in early access now, so it's not even hit 1.0 yet. But I would probably make Hoops as the default character, and Max, Pete, and Willow as enhanced costumes. And you have them use all the weapons that they make out of grass and bug parts in that game. Pillars of Eternity is now an Xbox franchise since they bought Obsidian. It's one they own. I don't know a whole lot about Pillars of Eternity, but I know Pallegina is a character that was in both games as a companion, so she's probably the way to go. But if you have a better idea, if you know the franchise better than me and you have a better idea, go ahead and leave that in the comments. State of Decay was a surprise hit for Xbox. State of Decay 2 has lasted a lot longer than people realize and has a lot more characters than people realize. The human characters might not make the most interesting fighters in a game like this because they don't really have many abilities, they're just kind of people, but that game does have special zombies, and I think the Juggernaut or the Feral, one of those two, would make for an interesting fighter. But if you do want to include a human character, Larice Davis was the protagonist of a DLC expansion. Most of the State of Decay characters are kind of interchangeable. It's not really a game based on characters, but Larice Davis was one of the exceptions because that DLC actually did have a story.
Together, compete for glory!
And now let's talk about Rare, and boy is there a lot to talk about with them. First and foremost is Sea of Thieves, the biggest game Rare has ever made. Sea of Thieves now has hit over 25 million players. It's a big deal. You're going to have to include a character in this game, and actually they would be one of the most foremost names in it. Problem is, it's tough to find a defined character that really represents Sea of Thieves. I would probably go with DeMarco Singh with his sister Ladida as an enhanced costume, but you could include just the playable pirates also as enhanced costumes, just call them Pirate Legends. Another quick note regarding Sea of Thieves, they have done crossover ships with Halo and Ori and Gears and Battletoads, and in all the trailers to present those ships, they have done Sea of Thieves style versions of all the theme songs of those. And we're going to include those in the game. They're already a great crossover, so why would we not include them in our crossover game? And then we go to Perfect Dark, Joanna Dark with her sister Velvet as an enhanced costume. They're a shoo-in. And I would again, similar to Arbiter, have her use the human weapons from the Carrington Institute, because we're also going to include Elvis as a playable character, and he gets to use the crazier alien weapons like the Farsight. Banjo and Kazooie are of course going to be in the game, with their classic look as a default, but I would have their design from Nuts and Bolts being a costume that you can earn. I would also include maybe Gruntilda and Mumbo Jumbo as possibilities. Conqueror is a shoo-in for this game, and Barry could possibly be an enhanced costume for him, or you could make an entirely new character out of Barry if you include things from the Matrix portion of Conqueror. The Panther King is also a possibility, although he might be better served as more of a stage hazard or this game's equivalent to an assist trophy. The Battletoads, you have to include them. Rash would be in from the jump, and Pimple and Zitz also, and I don't think they all need to be the same character through enhanced costumes. I think you can make unique movesets out of all of them based on the newest game. And you might even include the Dark Queen as a fourth character. Cameo from Cameo's Elements of Power, she's a shoo-in. That game is underrated. I think people who actually played it really like it. It did get kind of a bad reputation just because it was one of the first Rare games after they got bought by Xbox, so a lot of people had their knives out and wanted to hate it, but that game is very good. And a personal favorite, Viva Pinata. Horstachio is going to be in the game. He's the face on the game, and he's the face on the cartoons. He has to be included. This one's also included for Lisa. You could probably maybe even include Professor Pester, although again, like the Panther King, he might be better served as a stage hazard. And then we're going on to Killer Instinct. And with Killer Instinct, it's already a fighting game, so there are a whole host of characters you could use. I think Fulgore is number one. He has to be the first entrant from Killer Instinct. And then Jago, with Shadow Jago as an enhanced costume. Orchid, if they want to include somebody from who was not in the old Killer Instinct but was introduced in the newest one, then Hisako is the obvious choice. She was the fan favorite of the new game. Glacius and Saberwolf and Riptor are also options, and I'm gonna also throw in Spinal, and with Spinal I'm gonna do something unique and give him an enhanced costume from a different game, and that is going to be Captain Flameheart from Sea of Thieves. Could be an enhanced costume for Spinal. Shadowrun was a hero shooter on the Xbox 360. It actually has a lineage going back even further than that, but as far as Xbox game goes, it was that one, and that was kind of a cult favorite. We're going to include a troll from that game, and he's going to kind of have all the different abilities and weapons from that game rolled into this one character. Jack Joyce from Quantum Break, the agent from Crackdown, and if Terry Crews will be involved, we can include Commander Jackson as an enhanced costume for him. You could possibly include the Cougar from Mechasalt. You would have to shrink him down quite a bit, of course. And then we get into some of the JRPGs that they tried in the Xbox 360 generation, including Blue Dragon. I would have Shu as a character. He did the dragon that came out of his back, did all his fighting for him, and that would be included in this game too. So you would have to make that dragon a little smaller to make it work, but be great. And then Kame and Seth from Lost Odyssey, Edgar from Phantom Dust, Voodoo Vince, which is Phil Spencer's favorite game, Age of Empires is an interesting one because it's one of Xbox's, even though it's not on the console, it's still, you know, it's owned by Xbox. It's tough to think of a character from Age of Empires. I wrote down the Explorer, who was a hero unit from Age of Empires 3, and I haven't played Age of Empires 4 yet. Maybe there's a better example from that you could include, but Age of Empires has to be included. I mentioned Crimson Skies earlier. We're going to include Nathan Zachary, who I know if you've never played the Crimson Skies games, he might look like a Nathan Drake ripoff, but he was actually first. The Bard's Tale is a classic PC franchise that now is owned by Xbox when they bought NXile, so the Bard is going to be included in our game. And I believe that's actually all of the Xbox first-party franchises and IPs and studios that they own. I can't think of any others. Well, at least not any other big ones. Wait. What's that sound? Oh yeah, that whole thing. The Bethesda of it all. Yes, Microsoft now owns Bethesda and have since earlier this year, so there's a whole lot of Bethesda characters to talk about. Of course, from Elder Scrolls, you have the Dovahkiin, or the Dragonborn, with all his dragon shouts. That is probably going to be right next to Master Chief and Steve from Minecraft, front and foremost in your box art and your key art of this game. And Sheogorath, who was in several of the Elder Scrolls games and Elder Scrolls Online, is also a possibility. And then we go to Fallout. Of course, you have a Vault Dweller from Fallout, but I would actually include them in the Power Armor the whole time as a big bruiser character, because the Power Armor is the most iconic thing from Fallout. It is on all the box art for all the games. That's what people think of. But another thing people think of from Fallout is super mutants. You have Lily Bowen from Fallout New Vegas, or Strong from Fallout 4 as possibilities. The Deathclaw is also an iconic Fallout image. And Nick Valentine was a fan favorite from Fallout 4. I'm not sure exactly what his moveset would be, so he might be better served as some kind of an assist trophy. But, hey, maybe they can think of it. And then we move on to Dishonored. Corvo Atano and Emily Caldwin both have to be included in the game. They had unique movesets in Dishonored 2, so they can have unique movesets in this game. Prey, you have Morgan Yu from the most recent game, but don't forget Tommy from the first Prey.
The inner circle of death is where he resides. Hunting them at the far reaches of the earth and beyond. And with him lies our salvation. There is only one dominant life form in this universe, and it carries a steel-barreled sword of vengeance.
Another shoo-in is the Doomslayer, and I see the Doomslayer as almost a mid-range grappler. I would have him be holding the super shotgun as sort of his default weapon. He could use the meat hook to bring himself in close to people, and then either use the shotgun or use his grabs, which would be the different glory kills from his game. They would have to be toned down quite a bit because we're going to be aiming for T for teen for this game, but inspired by the glory kills. And then I think you could include a second character from Doom, and that is Davith, aka the Dark Lord, from Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 2. He would be another big bruiser just like Atriox and General Rain. BJ Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein, including the 3 kind of super abilities that he got in Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. They could be his specials. A Ranger from Quake, he could include the Dire Orb as one of his specials, and of course he has to have the ability to rocket jump. From the Evil Within, you could include Sebastian, but again, I think his moveset might not be that interesting, so maybe the Keeper would be a better possibility. Rage is a franchise that I don't really expect to keep going, but it had such interesting and unique weapons that I think they could make for a really cool moveset in a game like this. So I would include Walker from Rage 2 with Nicholas as an enhanced costume. Just to be able to throw their bladed boomerang around, I think could offer something that no other character can, even if the game itself isn't that well loved. But believe it or not, you don't want all A-listers in a game like this. You want some weirdos. You want some cult favorites. Some of the characters that people who have been with Xbox since 2001 will say, "Oh yeah, I think I remember that guy." So of course I think Blinks the Time Sweeper has to be a shoo-in, as well as Brutus from Brute Force. Jewel and Mac from Recore could make for an interesting tag team character. Recore is a game that launched in pretty bad shape, but got better over time, and now people who have actually played the Definitive Edition really like it. Unfortunately, it had that bad reputation it was never quite able to shake, but get on Game Pass and give it a try to Recore if you never did. Brutal Legend is an IP that Xbox picked up when they bought Double Fine, and so Eddie Riggs could be included. Azric was not a very good game, but that character was memorable for all the wrong reasons. Bleeding Edge, another game that wasn't very good, which is a shame for our purposes today because that whole roster would be a perfect fit for the kind of game we're talking about. Unfortunately, most people just kind of forgot about it. But still, I want to include Buttercup in our game here. Dub from Fusion Frenzy using various elements of all the mini-games from Fusion Frenzy in his moveset. Cooper from Grad by the Ghoulies, which was the first rare game for Xbox. Double Fine made Grim Fandango, Full Throttle, and Day of the Tentacle. The legal issues around them are a little bit murky, so I don't know if Xbox would have complete rights to use them, but maybe they could work that out. The Gunstringer was a Kinect game on 360, where you controlled actually a marionette cowboy zombie kind of thing, and I think that character would be very interesting to see. Jet Force Gemini was an N64 game made by Rare, but of course it was on the Rare Replay, so it is playable on Xbox, and they own the IP. I don't know if we'll ever see it again, but you could certainly throw them in a game like this. Tao Fang Fist of the Lotus was memorable for all the wrong reasons, but it was John Tobias actually helped develop that game, and the Exile is a character we could include as almost a joke. Kung Fu Chaos was made by the studio that later turned into Ninja Theory, and actually Kung Fu Chaos is kind of the gameplay of that is kind of the game we're looking for here, what we're talking about. However, it might be a game that Xbox might want to forget because unfortunately it's kind of remembered now more for its cultural insensitivity than for being a good game. Ninja Blade was actually an Xbox 360 console exclusive made by From Software. We're going to talk about From Software a little bit later. You could include Ken Ogawa, but I think there's better options out there. Infi from 99 Nights, which were two Xbox 360 console exclusives. Nightcaster Defeat the Darkness is almost completely forgotten today, but it would be kind of funny to include Aaron. Sudeki includes Eilish. Rise Son of Rome is another one where the legal rights are a little murky there, but if you can include Marius Titus, you definitely should. That's a cult favorite. Saberman from Saberwolf, as well as Commander Keen are both, one's made by Rare, one was made by Bethesda. Old mascots, but you would almost include them in the same way you include Game & Watch. And here's one that'll never ever happen, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway. Baldur from 2 Human. Boy, that game ended up being a complete disaster, but it was very memorable. And of course, the final character that would be unlocked in this game, if I had my way, would be Clippy from Microsoft Office. And he would kind of unfurl himself to do his attacks almost like Clay Fighter. But that's not all. Xbox owns a whole ton of other franchises that you could include as stages or music. I don't think they would make for a great fighter, and so yes, I did not include a Forza car because I think that joke is lame. But we're going to talk about Forza now, because Forza would make for a great stage. Probably Mexico from the newest Forza Horizon, but you could even include elements of Forza Motorsport. Now, music from Forza might be a little tough because they include so many licensed songs in their soundtrack, but I'm sure between all the 7 Forza Motorsport games and the 5 Forza Horizon songs, we can find enough original music between them to come up with a soundtrack here. While we're talking about racing games and vehicle games, Xbox also owns Midtown Madness, and they own Flight Simulator. You can make stages based off that. As a matter of fact, I would include some of these as mashup stages. I really liked it when PlayStation All-Stars, one franchise and mashed together with another to make its stages, and I think I would have the same thing be here too, especially because Power Stone 2, which is what we're using as a template, it had moving stages, and so I think that lends itself well to what we're talking about here. Black and White was an old Lionhead franchise. Broken Age was a Double Fine game that they kickstarted, and it became kind of one of the first Kickstarter hits, and was an adventure game, so I don't know if you could make a fighter from it, but you could definitely do a stage. Project Gotham Racing, Project Spark would make for a very interesting stage, because it was the game Dreams before Dreams was Dreams. That is a stage that could have the stage actually being built while you're fighting on it. Scream Ride was kind of a theme park simulator. Power Star Golf, Tell Me Why, Amped, Bloodwake, Rise of Nations, Zoo Tycoon, they could all be stages. And then I want to talk about Kinect games a little bit. Doritos Crash Course. Now, I don't think you could include Doritos, but you could just say Crash Course, as well as 1 vs 100, Kinect Sports, Kinect Adventures, Kinectimals. I would make the avatars kind of go through these different games in the background of the stage. Now, I'm not going to include the avatars as a playable fighter, if you didn't notice. I don't like that kind of thing. I don't like Mii's in Smash Brothers either. I think you could pull avatars from your own profile as well as your people on your friends list profiles if the game wants to do this. They would really go above and beyond and actually have your real-life friends' avatars in the backgrounds of the stage going through Crash Course and 1 vs 100, Kinect Sports, or Kinect Adventures. Crimson Dragon was an Xbox One launch game that was kind of a spiritual successor to Panzer Dragoon. That could be a stage. Double Fine Happy Action Theater as well as Iron Brigade are both obviously Double Fine games. Roblox is one of the biggest damn games in the world, and it is console exclusive on Xbox, believe it or not. And so that has to be included in some way, shape, or form. I don't know Roblox that well, so maybe there's a fighter you could include, but hey, I'm not the guy to tell you about that. But they could definitely be a stage at least in this game. Dance Central was a kind of the only big hit on Kinect, and I think you can include that, even though they don't own it, so they would have to go make that deal. I'm going to include Steel Battalion as a stage, and I think that might actually be interesting if you are literally fighting on top of the controller. That massive Goliath of a controller, and have hands actually trying to use the controller as you're fighting, and that being sort of the stage hazard. And finally, I'm going to combine Solitaire and Minesweeper from Windows into one stage. And now it's time to talk about third-party guests, and this is quite a lengthy list here, and some of these might be controversial because people say, well, you know, I don't associate these characters with Xbox. I'm going to try to justify the ones that I feel need justifying a little bit here, but I just want to remind people that also this would include, the game would be included on PC, of course. But, you know, just because a character or a franchise has a connection with PlayStation doesn't mean it also doesn't have one with Xbox. They can have a connection with both at the same time, because these companies don't really operate as console warriors like you see on Twitter so often. Look, I get it. In a perfect world, all of these characters would be from exclusives or timed exclusives or something intrinsically tied to Xbox. But it really just doesn't work that way in reality. If you look at Cloud and Ryu and Joker and Smash Brothers, or even Big Daddy and Bioshock, you know, there's really only 3 questions that have to be answered yes in order for a character to be eligible. Number 1, is the character on the console in any way, shape, or form? Number 2, can they legally get the character? And a pre-existing business relationship, of course, helps with that. And number 3, is this character popular? If all 3 of those are yes, well, then they're on the table, even if they're not intrinsically tied to Xbox. However, if they are intrinsically tied to Xbox, or if their game is on Game Pass, well then yeah, they should be given priority. But at a certain point, if somebody's popular, you just take them, if you can get them.
I can see you. I can see you perfectly.
So some of these will be obvious, like the first one here, Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden. The original Xbox revived this franchise. They were timed exclusives, and, well, I think he is associated with Xbox now. And sort of Ninja Gaiden's sister franchise, Dead or Alive, we're going to include Kasumi, because people might not remember this, but before the Xbox launched, Halo was not necessarily positioned as the killer app. It was almost a surprise when Halo was such a big hit. Dead or Alive 3 was positioned as the Xbox's killer app, as well as Oddworld. Dead or Alive 3 and 4 were highly tied to Xbox at that time. We're going to also include Sam Fisher from Splinter Cell. This one should be a no-brainer. Speaking of no-brainers, we're going to include Frank West from Dead Rising, with Chuck Green and Nick Ramos as enhanced costumes for him. Cuphead from Cuphead with Mugman as an enhanced costume. That was a time exclusive for Xbox. We could maybe even throw in King Dice from Cuphead, and that would be worth it just for the music alone, but also, of course, that IP is huge now. We have to include that.
Understand the concept of love. Understand the concept of love. Understand the concept of love.
Jet Set Radio Future was an Xbox exclusive, so we're going to include Beats from Jet Set Radio 1 and 2. Phantasy Star Online 2 in the West is only on Xbox and PC, of course. Now in the East, it's a different story. It's on PS4, but not over here, and it runs on Microsoft's Azure servers, so that is highly tied to Xbox. We're going to include Manon from Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, or possibly Xeno from Vanilla Phantasy Star Online 2. This one might be controversial, but we're going to include Ichiban from Yakuza Like a Dragon. The next-gen version of Yakuza Like a Dragon was Xbox Series exclusive for a long time. It didn't come to PS5 for a couple months. It was on PS4, but not 5. And Xbox has the entire Yakuza series on Game Pass, so I think that Xbox has been making great strides to make Yakuza tied to their ecosystem. We're going to definitely include Ichiban, and possibly even Kiryu if you can. Rise of the Tomb Raider was a one-year timed exclusive on Xbox, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider also did their marketing through Xbox. It was on their E3 stage, so Lara Croft is one we're going to throw on the table. Agent 47 from Hitman. This one's a little bit of a stretch because Hitman's never been particularly tied to Xbox, but IO Interactive, the developer, is reported to be making a game exclusively for Xbox at the moment. V from Cyberpunk 2077, and boy, I know there's a lot of people who wouldn't want to see this character show up in the game considering how that game went, but sometimes you have to separate the online chatter from sales and what people actually bought and played, and Cyberpunk 2077 was popular. I know a lot of people have hatred for it, and always will, but a lot of people don't. And while we're talking about CD Projekt Red, you can get Geralt from The Witcher because that also was tied to Xbox as far as it had its marketing. It was on Xbox's E3 stage.
What's the matter, Stray? Nothing left to lose? Well, would you look at that? Fascinating. Will you join me, starving wolf?
Sekiro was also revealed on an Xbox E3 stage. I know a lot of people will think of FromSoft as PlayStation first because of Bloodborne, but hey, they have ties to both companies. Obviously they did do Bloodborne as we just mentioned, but Sekiro and Dark Souls have had their reveals on Xbox's E3 stage, as well as the fact that they did Otogi. So I think Sekiro's on the table. I think the protagonists from all the Dark Souls games are on the table, as well as maybe Arturios the Abyss Walker, and I think Raiko from Otogi are all on the table. I'm not saying they're shoo-ins, they would have to be negotiated, but they have those ties, they have the connection with Xbox. And so does the Tales franchise. Tales of Vesperia was exclusive to Xbox 360 for a long time, so we're going to include Rapide in our game. And you might even also be able to throw in Alphen from the newest Tales of Arise. Scarlet Nexus was a game Xbox really tied themselves to. They put it in their very first showcase of the Xbox Series X. They ended their post-E3 roundtable with it, and they also put it on their Tokyo Game Show live stream when it went to Game Pass. So Kasane and Yuito are both options for our game, and with their psychokinetic powers, they could be very unique. It's time to talk about a big one. Mass Effect. Now, the original Mass Effect was actually published by Microsoft. That was before BioWare was owned by EA, and it was exclusive for a long, long time. Not only that, but I believe Xbox still has a partial ownership of publishing of the first game only, and the reason I say that is because when Game Pass was revealed, Mass Effect was on there, and no other EA games were, not even Mass Effect 2 or 3. And when backwards compatibility was revealed, Mass Effect was on there and no other EA games were yet. So I believe Xbox still has some tie to Mass Effect 1's publishing. They don't own the IP, but they do have some rights over that game. However, even if without owning the IP, they obviously have very good ties with EA now. EA Play is a part of Game Pass. So the Xbox and EA relationship is very, very strong. So, we're going to include multiple Mass Effect characters, maybe more than any other third-party franchise here, but it's Mass Effect. It's a big deal. I think Rex, Liara, Garrus, and Tali should all be included. The reason why is because Tali's going to... I think all four of those characters are the most iconic characters from Mass Effect, and they all have a wide range of abilities here. Rex is going to be a big bruiser, Liara is going to go crazy with biotics, Tali's going to be using all the tech powers from the game, and Garrus is just the most popular character from Mass Effect. I don't know if he could have the most interesting movesets, but he's the most popular character. And while we're on this BioWare train, let's include Varric from Dragon Age and Death's Hand from Jade Empire. Lost Planet is a Capcom franchise, but it was exclusive to Xbox 360, so Wayne Holden from Lost Planet is going to be included. Enslaved Odyssey to the West was developed by Ninja Theory. Xbox doesn't own the IP, but since they do own the developer now, I would love to include Monkey from that game in.
Got something to say, soldier? Speak up. Easy, Anubis. Come on, set him down, sir. They didn't know.
Unreal Championship 1 and 2 were exclusive to the original Xbox, and that was a huge deal at the time. We're going to include Anubis from Unreal Championship 2 in our game. Assassin's Creed is maybe a bit of a stretch because that's always been multi-platform, but they do a lot of their marketing through Xbox. They've done bundles of consoles with Xbox, and they show their trailers on Xbox's E3 stage a lot. So I think Ezio would be a perfect addition here. You could maybe include somebody from one of the newer games like Cassandra, but I think Ezio is probably still the face of the franchise. Saints Row, a lot of people don't remember that Saints Row 1 was exclusive to Xbox 360, And the reason why is because Xbox did not have Grand Theft Auto yet. It was still exclusive to PlayStation at the time, so Saints Row was kind of their competitor. Eventually, Grand Theft Auto came over to Xbox, and Saints Row went multi-platform, but that tie, I think, is still there. So we're going to include Johnny Gat. BioShock was exclusive to Xbox for almost a year, I believe. And so even though a Big Daddy was playable in PlayStation All-Stars, who's really going to remember that, honestly, or hold it against him? So I think you include a Big Daddy here, or maybe Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite. Alan Wake was Xbox exclusive. I know now that the remaster has come to all platforms, but that tie is still there. He might be tough to come up with an interesting moveset for. You might have to do some stuff with his flashlight to really make him stand out in this game. Lucky from Super Lucky's Tale, that launched as an Xbox exclusive. When they did New Super Lucky's Tale, which was a much better game, honestly, it did kind of go multi-platform, but that tie is still there. Stubbs the Zombie. Titanfall, the first Titanfall, never went anywhere else except for Xbox, so we're going to include Jack Cooper, who is actually the protagonist of Titanfall 2, and maybe he can include BT to kind of be off-screen, but shoot some missiles and stuff, kind of from off-screen towards his enemies as part of his moveset. And since we're going to include Respawn, if you get them on board, hell, then you might as well include a character from Apex Legends if they allow you. Xbox was the first console to have PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, so you include the character from the box art in this game, and he can use all the different things from that game because it's still immensely popular.
I have one more big announcement to share. Take a look. At long last, the day we have all been waiting for has arrived. And it gives me great pleasure to be able to unveil this to you today. An Xbox 360 version of Final Fantasy XIII, the latest in the Final Fantasy series, which has seen more than 85 million units shipped worldwide, is planned for release.
This one will ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to say Lightning from Final Fantasy XIII. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because if you remember, Final Fantasy XIII was the first Final Fantasy that came to Xbox, and it was a huge deal when it happened. A lot of people who have been playing Final Fantasy on PlayStation were furious at the time. Even today, Final Fantasy XIII is a game that had gotten enhanced on Xbox One X, and that carries over, obviously, to Series X, and I believe it just got FPS boosted too, so it's kind of the best place. Xbox is the best place to play that game now. So we're going to try to throw her in. Xbox was the first console to have Smite, which is still also very popular. They had timed exclusivity on Death's Door, so you can maybe include the Crow from that game in. They have full exclusivity on The Ascent, and as far as we know, on Tunic. And Slime Rancher 2 is going to come to Game Pass on day 1 next year, so you can include a character from Slime Rancher. Vin Diesel's Ark 2 is launching exclusively on Xbox. Ark Survival Evolved is a massively popular Game Pass game, so you definitely want to maybe try to grab a character from that. This one is more of a backstage connection than something that is forward-facing, but Rod Ferguson used to run the Coalition, who makes Gears of War, and then he went over to Blizzard to run the Diablo franchise. And Mikey Barrow used to be a executive at Xbox, and now he is the runner of Blizzard. And so you can maybe use those connections to include somebody from Diablo or possibly even Tracer from Overwatch. I know right now Blizzard's in a really bad spot, mostly of their own doing, but I'm going to throw them on the table anyway, but only if Blizzard can get their act cleaned up. If they can't, screw them. One that is a little bit more of a stretch is Borderlands. They've been on Xbox's E3 stage before. It's always been a multi-platform franchise though, but still, it's just insanely popular, so if you can get somebody like Lilith or Claptrap, you go ahead and include them. And it's a similar story with Destiny, except Destiny actually had a big Game Pass deal. It seems like it's just now about to end, but for a year, it and all of its expansions were on Game Pass, including the brand new one at the time, Beyond Light. Cade 6, Ikora, Zavala, all of them are on the table. I don't think you include all 3 of them, but they could pick which one they would make the most interesting moveset for. A Plague Tale Requiem is coming to Game Pass day 1, and the studio that makes that, Asobo, actually made Flight Sim for Xbox, so there's definitely that deep connection there. So you can include the protagonist of A Plague Tale, and I'm going to totally butcher the pronunciation here of Amencia Darun, I believe it's her name is. Some people may forget that the Xbox 360 actually had timed exclusivity or full exclusivity on a lot of JRPGs. A lot of them ended up being forgettable or cult favorites, but Capel from Infinite and Discovery, Rush Sykes from The Last Remnant, Polka from Eternal Sonata, Etsuma from Enchanted Arms, Edge Maverick from Star Ocean The Last Hope, all those games launched on Xbox exclusively. Some of them are still exclusive to Xbox, and they're all possibilities. Kelly Olemny from Gun Valkyrie was a Sega published exclusive for the original Xbox. And finally, one that is never ever gonna happen due to the ownership issues of what happened later, The Player from Sunset Overdrive. Yes, Insomniac made this game exclusively for Xbox. Xbox published it, but they let Insomniac own the IP, and Insomniac later got bought by PlayStation. So technically, PlayStation now owns Sunset Overdrive, even though it's an Xbox exclusive. They will never allow this to happen, but it's fun to think about anyway. But let's not forget Xbox Live Arcade from the Xbox 360. In many ways, Xbox is responsible for the indie boom that happened. And a lot of the best remembered games from Xbox 360 were these live arcade games, and I think you can absolutely take advantage of that. For instance, the Behemoth made Alien Hominid, and they made Castle Crashers. I think the Alien and I think a Knight from Castle Crashers could absolutely be playable characters in a game like this. They also made Battle Block Theater, which might make for a great stage. Charlie from Charlie Murder, as well as The Dishwasher. That is the studio that later went on to do Salt and Sanctuary, but they made these games for Xbox Live Arcade before that. Meat Boy from Super Meat Boy, Splosion Man with Miss Splosion Man as a enhanced skin, Captain Smiley from Comic Jumper, the Kid from Bastion, Dust and Elysian Tale, as well as, if you can make this work, I would include a ship from Geometry Wars as a playable character. Crimson Alliance is on the table. Mark of the Ninja is on the table. Mark of the Ninja is a personal favorite of mine, and the Mark of the Ninja would be a great character. Frank and the Maw from The Maw. Shadow Complex was one of the first big Xbox Live Arcade hits. Jason Fleming from the game should definitely be included if you can get him. Marky Cat from Small Arms, and Limbo, or Inside, probably as a stage. I don't think the kid from either of those games would make for a great fighter, but a stage for sure. You know what a lot of people requested from Smash Brothers? Characters like Shovel Knight, characters like Sans, characters like Hollow Knight. They didn't do any of that, and I don't think Nintendo ever would. But, you know where else all those characters are? On Game Pass, yes, or they were. Believe it or not, all the games I just mentioned are currently or used to be on Game Pass. Now you could say, well, they don't have that Xbox connection, but who? If you can get them, you get them. And because they are on Game Pass, you know those developers have no problem taking a check from Microsoft. And don't forget, one of the big reasons we're making this game is to get people to try new things on Game Pass, because that's what benefits Xbox the most with Game Pass. Not if you just play a couple games, they want you to really spread out and try many, many things. Plus, there's also the fact that this hypothetical game we're making here, just like all Xbox games, would also be on PC. So you could say, well, okay, they might not be thought of as Xbox tied in, but they're definitely PC tied in. So whatever, if you can get them, you definitely get them. And that includes Hollow Knight. Yes, Hollow Knight is on Game Pass. The Beheaded from Dead Cells. Zagreus from Hades. Hades was on Game Pass on day one of its Xbox version. It was on Switch and PC before that. Shovel Knight was on Game Pass. Undertale is currently on Game Pass, so Sans. Streets of Rage 4 is on Game Pass, so Axel Stone, Miriam from Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Yooka-Laylee, which that one's very interesting because who wouldn't want to see Banjo-Kazooie versus Yooka-Laylee? Candyman from Lethally Blaze. This one actually surprised me in my research, but Darkest Dungeon is on Game Pass. I didn't realize that. I don't know who the character who would be best served for that game to be playable and the kind of thing we're talking about, but they're on the table as well. Going Under, Dead by Daylight is massively popular, and yes, that is indeed on Game Pass, as is Slay the Spire and Carrion. A couple upcoming games next year that got a lot of huge buzz were Replaced and Atomic Heart. Echo Generation is on there now. Stalker 2 is coming next year. SteamWorld Dig used to be on there, so Rusty is on the table, and that developer is actually making a game currently for Xbox. It comes out about a month from now, and that game is The Gunk by Thunderful. The main character from that game is called Ronnie. Guacamelee is on Game Pass, so we're going to include Juan, and they are making an Xbox exclusive for Q1 of next year called Nobody Saves the World. Until we play that game, I don't know who the character would be. With Killer Queen Black, you could turn the queen herself into a fighter. At the very least, it would make for an excellent stage. In the process of editing this video, and boy, it sure is taking a long time, they announced that Windjammers 2 is going to be on Game Pass day one. I freaking love Windjammers, always have. That could work. You could pull a fighter from Windjammers or a stage from Windjammers. I think the stage hazards just write themselves. And a couple other games from Game Pass would make for great stages, if not playable characters. Stardew Valley, for example, is coming to Game Pass this fall. I don't think that would make for a great fighter necessarily, but a stage for sure. Same thing with Spiritfarer and Sable and The Artful Escape. Man, The Artful Escape for both the stage and the music would be wonderful. Celeste was on there, it no longer is. Overcooked and Among Us would also make for great stages. Whoa boy, I've thrown a lot of characters and games at you, and that was by design. Believe me, it took a lot longer to edit than it did to watch. But I wanted to demonstrate the sheer mass of possibilities. Of course, most of these won't make the cut, that's not realistic, but there are a world of options here. And we're not quite done yet. We're going to talk about the future a little bit here because there's a ton of upcoming games Xbox has where they could include a character from as that game comes out, which is something Xbox or something Smash Bros. Hasn't always done a great job of except for Corrin. But I think it's a great opportunity to elevate both games.
They say, the wonder is, not that the field of stars is so vast, but that we have measured it.
And the biggest and most obvious one, of course, is Starfield, coming fall next year. Avowed is coming from Obsidian, that's in the Pillars of Eternity universe. Contraband from Avalanche is another one. Redfall from Arcane coming next year. We've seen Layla Ellison, she got a lot of attention. We don't really know much about the other characters yet, but Layla definitely grabbed people's attention right off the bat. An Eternal from Everwild by Rare. Crossfire X is coming, As Dusk Falls from Interior Night, and then some that Jeff Grubb and Jez Corden have reported on. Project Indus from Oxide Games, Project Dragon from IO Interactive, we talked about them a little bit earlier, Project Shaolin, which is a Wu-Tang Clan game by Brass Lion. I don't think you'll be able to get the Wu-Tang Clan to be playable in this game also, but I'm sure that game will have some kind of original character you can include. Project Belfry from Stoic Studios, which is a 2D brawler, so that seems like a perfect fit from here. Pentiment, aka Project Missouri by Obsidian, that's more of a detective game, so I don't know if you could use a fighter, but definitely a stage. Project Midnight from Compulsion, Pax Die from Mainframe Industries, Project Mara from Ninja Theory, Kojima's rumored to be making an Xbox exclusive, and so all of these are possibilities. We don't know yet as far as which one of them would be great for stages, which would be great for fighters, but they're all on the table, they all should be thought about. And then there's Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, which are strange cases because they're owned by Xbox and they own the studios and the IP, but they launched on PS5 first due to the fact that those contracts existed before Xbox bought the studios. But They will be exclusive on PS5 for 1 year, and then they're going to be on Game Pass, and any future iterations, if there's a Deathloop 2 or Ghostwire Tokyo 2, they're going to be exclusive to Xbox. So, for all intents and purposes, they are Xbox IPs, just in this weird state of limbo for 1 year. So, Colt and Juliana from Deathloop, maybe as Juliana as an enhanced costume for Colt, or maybe as 2 separate characters if you can make their movesets unique, and Akito from Ghostwire Tokyo definitely need to be included. And that about wraps it up. It's an idea I've been passionate about for a while. I really want Xbox to pull the trigger on this. I know there's been other calls for people to say they should do their big crossover as a kart racer, or as a hero shooter, almost like Overwatch. Kart racer, I'm not crazy about that idea at all, to be honest with you, because it doesn't feel like it would truly kind of represent the characters well, because in a car racer, every character is just kind of a skin. They're all doing the same stuff. They're all driving a car, right? Whereas they're not getting their own unique move sets. They're not pulling stuff from their own games unless it's a driving game. So I don't love that idea. Honestly, it doesn't feel like it's really celebrating the characters as much as it's just kind of putting them together almost as a stunt. They're just skins at that point. A hero shooter's more interesting. If they chose to go down that road, I'd be excited for it. I'd be all for it. My issue with that is I think it's a little too hardcore. It's tough for people to just pick up and have fun with the kind of way you want. You want this game to be, we talked about before, you want this game to be approachable on a casual level, even if it has that undercurrent of competitiveness, where I think a hero shooter is very intimidating for people to step into. But I'm a huge Overwatch fan, so I'd be all, if they went down that route, hey, I'd still be very excited for it. So this is a long video, but I hope I demonstrated all the possibilities here. Obviously, they're not going to do all those characters. I just named you, I don't know, maybe 150 characters. That's not going to happen. But I just wanted to demonstrate that, hey, this game could absolutely work, and it's something they should do, and it's something that they could do aspects of better than anybody else. So get on the ball, Xbox, make this happen.